Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sunspot Live. I'm Scott Brooks, your host. You already know that. I am looking forward to uh, being with you today. Hello, Jana. Always happy to have you here. I've got a number of things. Oh, I got to switch my camera. There we go. I've got a number of things I want to share with you today. First off, though, I want to remind you why we're here, and that is to be a beast for good in society. I'm going to come up with a Beast for Good logo and maybe an acronym or something of the sort so that we can share in that together because I am amped up about all of us being a beast for good. And if we each do our part, then we will make a big difference in this world. Before I get to my stack of stuff I want to share with you, I want to start by sharing with you the hat I've got on today. I just got it about 5 minutes ago from my good brother Jeffrey Lynch, as you all know him by. But you can see, I think, I'm not sure, but for you Instagram, see that fancy logo? Isn't that nice? For you on Facebook and the others, it says Poet Jeffrey Lynch, and it's got PJL with some cool paisleys on it, which I love paisleys, but man, this is a nice hat, and I wanted to be able to share it with you and wear it throughout the show in honor of my pal who will be starting his show next Wednesday, April the 17th, I believe that is. Yes, it is. And at what time is his show? 4:30. So right here, same back place, but a different time for Jeffrey Lynch and Rhyme Time. So, and Jeff, as usual, will be joining us at the end of the show today and talk about some cool things that he's got planned. But today I want to start with talking about a number of things, some of which are local, some of which aren't so local. But I think I've already mentioned the first one to you, and that is that we are right in the middle of an election cycle for both City Council and for the school board of Waxahachie School District. There are three seats open on City Council. Two of them are incumbents who don't have an opponent, and then one of them is Mayor. I got that backwards. Mayor David Hill, who has an opponent for place one for City Council. They are out campaigning now, and will be doing more. So early voting starts on April the 22nd, goes through that whole week until that Saturday, April the 27th, and then picks back up on Monday and Tuesday of the following week. That's early voting. So that's 6, 7, 8 days. And then May 4th is the election day. On the school board side, there are, I think it's the same, 3 races open. 2 of them are candidates that are unopposed, and then one of them has 2 candidates, Adrian Cooper and Andrew White, both of whom I know, and I believe it's fair to say that, I don't believe it, I know it, it's fair to say that we will be endorsing one of them, just as we probably will with the mayor's race. I'm almost certain we will, because I feel this not burden, but an obligation to make sure that, given all the research and studying we've done of these candidates, that we're able to help you all know who it is that we or I have decided to endorse, and then you can give that whatever measure of weight you want to, or credibility. But it's important. It's an important piece of what a newspaper does. As you know, particularly on a national scale, these candidates and politicians are always looking for endorsements, to be endorsed by this or that media outlet or newspaper or person. So we'll be doing the same thing in our own community. But I can't say enough about the importance of voting. I know those of you watching and listening already know that, and I would just ask that you take the time in Waxahachie. It takes no more than 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes. In early voting, I don't think it takes that much longer with Election Day voting, but it doesn't take very long for us to cast our vote to make a difference in our own community. And with these 2 entities, the school board and City Council, it is wise for us to vote and have an impact on those people who are seeking a position on boards and councils that will affect our daily lives in ways that I just don't have enough time to tell you. So that is what I wanted to share with you. Again, April the 22nd through the 27th, Monday through Saturday. And then on the following Monday and Tuesday, the 29th and 30th, that is early voting. On the week of that same week, the week of the 29th, Saturday, the May 4th, will be Election Day, and you can cast your vote that way as well. So that's exciting stuff, and I'm looking forward to it. My column on it, candidates, will be over the next 2 weeks. Tomorrow I'll share with you what I'm writing about here in just a minute, but I will have my columns on these candidates next week and the week after. I want to also remind you that next Monday evening between 5 to 7 p.m. at the Civic Center, the Texas Rangers Trophy Tour will be in town to share the actual World Series trophy with those of us who want to go out and see it. You'll be able to take pictures and be able to look at the trophy, be able to, I think you can touch it. I don't know if you can walk around with it, but I would doubt it. But you'll be able to see it and feel it and have fun with it and take some pride in our team winning the World Series last year. So they'll be here again at the Civic Center from 5 to 7. And then at 7 o'clock, City Council begins its council meeting that night. There will be a proclamation that making that day, April the 15th, Texas Ranger Day in Waxahachie. So we're looking forward to that. Hey, Jonna. Hey, D. Clemens. Good to have both of you, obviously, and as usual. So Texas Rangers Trophy Tour next Monday, 5 to 7 at the Civic Center. Please, if you get a chance, tell your neighbor, tell your friends at work, tell your kids, tell anybody that will listen that it's here, and you can come out and see it. It's not every day that you get to see a World Series trophy, so we're excited about that. How about that eclipse yesterday? It'd be interesting what you all thought about it. So if you have an opinion or a thought or an experience you want to share, please do. I'd love to share it with everybody else. But we stood outside like most everybody else did, outside the sun's office, pardon the pun, and observed the moon coming between us and the sun in what was a total eclipse. And I tell you what, if there's ever any question for all the atheists in the world, not that there are any watching this show, maybe, but for every atheist, I don't know how it is that anyone could deny the presence of God when we see something like the eclipse that we saw yesterday. Imagine the abilities that science and weather folks have to be able to say this is when this eclipse occurred down to the minute, and that it lasted 4 minutes, and sure enough, as we all observed, it did. But to be able to live in a place where those kinds of things occur, again, speaks to what I know to be a God out there. Things like that can't just happen by chance. God is in control. God put this all in motion, and all of us ought to be aware of that and certainly celebrate it. But it wasn't quite the afternoon for us. I wanted to show you real quick what tomorrow morning. I should have pulled this up, but I want to show you. Let me see here if I can. That wasn't what I wanted to do. Let me go back. I'll just tease it this way. If you get a chance, pick up tomorrow's Waxahachie Sun, and on the front page you will see some incredible pictures of the eclipse, kind of in a progression sort of way. And it's really awesome, the pictures that our team was able to take. And in some ways, it's just humbling. It's just an incredible experience. You know, I don't know about you, but if somebody ever asked me what is it that I could share with people that no one or most don't know, won't be that I just saw an eclipse yesterday, but along with an eclipse, I watched Mount St. Helens erupt with my naked eye on May the 18th, 1980. I watched it and experienced the following week of having to wear masks and everything covered with ash. It was quite an amazing thing, similar to the awesome nature of an eclipse. So I can't remember when the next eclipse is coming, but I think 2045. But yesterday's was an awesome display of only something God could pull off, in my opinion. Let me switch gears real quick. As you know, I take in a lot of news, and I watch, I listen, I read a ton of news, trying to keep up with what's going on in this world, in this country, and in our state, and our city. And I'm not going to tell you anything you don't already know or likely believe, but don't you get the sense that America is just being sold out these days? I mean, when I look at the news, it's obvious to me that those who should be most obsessed with protecting America and growing America and taking care of America, nurturing America, are those who are putting America at risk. And we hear about it on the news, but we don't really hear about it on the news in a straight up kind of way, which I'm going to address here in just a minute. I'm going to share something with you that I think you will find interesting. But it just seems like there's a willingness, a desire even, a plan, an intent to sell our country out and to make us weaker rather than stronger. I mention that because if you consider what's going on at the border, you consider what's going on in Ukraine, if you consider inflation, if you consider the Department of Justice, the FBI, things and institutions that even 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I would have never believed would ever be compromised, and yet today they are not only compromised, they are being used as tools to weaken this country, and I just don't get it. And there was a time when I had empathy and sympathy for this administration and our president, but I don't any longer. I think that whatever comes their way, as long as the rest of the country doesn't get hurt, is what they deserve. But we're being sold out, and that means your kids and mine, our grandkids, our friends' kids, everyone in our world is being impacted by what's happening, and it just amazes me. I was just talking to Jeff and the team here a minute ago, Doug and Jackson, about these hats the hat that I'm wearing. It used to be that a hat cost $19.99 or $20. Today, when you go buy a hat, it's $40, and that same kind of increases across the board. So when we hear about the inane, crazy comments that inflation's coming down, it's coming down off of. It's still an increase. It went up. It spiked, and so now, instead of recognizing that it had increased significantly and that they're working to get it back to where it was, all we hear are things like, inflation is coming down. Well, inflation is coming down, but inflation's still way up. We don't hear the second part of that, and I just I'm losing patience, and it's really about being a beast for good. Is to say, wait a minute, don't care who I'm going to lose as a friend. Don't care. I'm not going to argue about it. It's a fact that what's happening to our country is that the president and his team is selling us out. When you see thousands upon thousands of illegal immigrants come into our country, we just go back to COVID when we witnessed this administration firing soldiers because they wouldn't get a vaccine, yet thousands upon thousands of immigrants coming into our country without any fear of being punished or even caught. We didn't care. We don't care today. It seems that they might have intents and purposes that, not to mention illnesses. It seems like that doesn't matter, but we're willing to fire the brave men and women of the military for back then not getting a COVID shot. It's just you can't make this stuff up, as they say. So I'm here to say that our country is being sold out, and that November the 5th, I believe it is, couldn't get here quick enough. And my feeling is that most of you watching and commenting believe that. Hi, Marianne. Happy to have you today. You're right. No worries. God wins. I agree. I'm not worried about it, but I'm frustrated about it, and I'm angry about it because it's backwards and it's upside down. And something's got to be done. And I believe I know what's going to happen in November. that will fix things or put us back on the right track. But man, what's going to happen between now and in November? Because every day matters. So I felt obligated or compelled, provoked, given what I had read today and from a number of sources, just about the continual, I don't know what the word is, dragging our country down. It's just got to stop because it's becoming, it's no longer a novel thing. It's no longer an anomaly. It seems to me that it's being purposeful, and we've got to be aware of it. So I just wanted to share that with you. Tomorrow, on Much Better News, I've written a column. It'll be out in tomorrow's Sun about the joys of owning a dog. I like you probably, I do get weighed down by all the things that I just mentioned, along with local politics and the constant drumbeat of this or that as a newspaper person, just we expect it and we know it's coming, but it just can wear you down. So I thought, you know what, this week I think what will be good is for all of us, is for me to write a column about something that really is precious in life, and that is the relationship we have with our dogs or other types of pets, in our case, dogs. And I enjoyed writing the column, and I got a great feeling from it, and I walked away happy. And every time I think of my dogs, just like my wife and my family and my kids, it brings me to a happy place. So if you have dogs or you want to share with me, send me pictures, post pictures here. If you ever want to reach out to me, it's scott@waxahachiesun.com, scott@waxahachiesun.com. I'd love to see your pets, but pets make all the difference. And in our case, it's dogs. We have two boy Chihuahuas, little Lucifers, as I refer to them. One of them's 3, one of them's 4. The 4-year-old is named Binks, B-I-N-X, and the 3-year-old is EJ. And they are as amazing pets as I've ever owned. We love them like crazy. And then we have a 10-year-old, what's called a Pyrenees, which is the cross between a Pyrenees and a Labrador. Big, beautiful white Maggie. She's beautiful. She's gotten older. She's losing her eyesight and her hearing, but she makes our home a home for sure. So I just wanted to be able to share. I don't go into specifics about our dogs, but I just talk about the general idea of owning a dog in hopes that everybody will be able to experience the relationship with a pet or dog like that. So that's what's coming tomorrow. Jackson, will you turn that fan up and a little colder? So that's what's coming tomorrow in the Sun. But the Sun's, I just told our editor a few minutes ago before coming over to do the show that tomorrow's paper is a beautiful paper, and very proud of it. It's 18 pages, and one that I think you will find interesting and valuable, not only with the pictures that you will see of a variety of things, but the stories, obviously, that we have. So very happy about tomorrow's Sun and putting out the papers every Wednesday is a joy for us. It's a labor of love for sure. Most of our biggest footprint is with our digital stuff. We reach 50,000 people a week. Our printed version reaches a smaller group of people most of whom were raised with reading a newspaper and are very important readers of ours. And so we love doing it all. And again, it's a labor of love. Yes, my wife says our dogs are the best. They are the best. EJ, Binks, and Maggie. So if you want to share your dog with me or post something about your pet, please do. I'd love to see it. I also wanted to share with you, and I should have done this ahead of time, but I didn't. So I don't want to bore you with me trying to navigate this computer. But let me see if I can do it and it not impact you real quick. Here we go. Let me turn this sound down. Hang on one second. Almost there. But I wanted to share with you this. I don't think I have this right. I don't. No, I don't. Well, anyway, I'll share it with you next time. It is a video of a young man. It must be 15 or 16, and he has a father or dad. They don't have much of a relationship, and the video tells a story and then shows what the young man did about it. But his dad, who wasn't a very good man, mugged a woman, a 70-something-year-old woman who had just lost her husband of nearly 60 years, and was at the cemetery to visit his gravesite site, and she was mugged by this man, and he stole $750 from her. Well, the young man, who again is a high school student in the band, doing really well, saw the report on the news, noticed that the perpetrator was his daddy, and decided that he would reach out to the woman and try to repay her. So he did. He reached out. They met. The cameras were there, and he gave her all the money he had, which was $250 that he had been given to go to band camp. He gave it to her, apologized. Heartwarming story. When she accepted the apology, accepted the money, but turned right around and gave it back to him so that he could go to camp. I'll share it with you next time we're in here, and you can get a sense of what I'm talking about. I also want to share with you the following story that I'm about to read to you. Now, I'm going to ask you to indulge me because I want to read a story, and I'm not even going to set it up other than to say that it is a story that speaks to what's going on in the country with respect to the media. We work. Well, you don't have to work hard to be ethical. You don't have to work hard to be honest, so we don't have to work hard at those things. But I challenge anyone, other than on page 3 of the Waxahachie Sun, to ever find a story in which you could find a shred of bias or preference or opinion. They just don't exist, and that's by design. And so we hired a staff that's been with us almost since day one, and never have I had to think about any story having any bias in it. Matter of fact, I don't, by design, I don't manage any aspect of our content other than on page 3. And the only reason I have something to do with page 3 is because I write a column there. But every other page of our newspaper, whether it's 16, 14, 18, 24, 22, whatever page count, that's all managed by our editor, Joanne Livingston, who has complete independence in publishing the stories that her and her team produce every week. Those stories are fact-based and straight up, and I'm not going to influence it one way or the other. If a friend or acquaintance or even a family member or me is the reason for a story, then that story is going to appear, and I assure you of that. I've lost too many friends over the years to know it, and I'm willing to take that risk. I would rather, my commitment is to you, our readers, not to making sure that we cover for friends who have done something wrong. So every piece of our paper is unbiased except for on page 3. So with that said, I want to read something to you now. It looks long, but it's not too awfully long, but I do ask you to indulge me. I'm going to read this, and then I'm going to get Jeff in here, and we will have some fun with Jeff, and then we'll be done for the day. But let me just read this to you. It says, I have been at NPR for 25 years, and here's how we lost America's trust. Just so you know, if you don't, NPR is National Public Radio. It has been for a long, long time a slightly left-leaning publication or radio, and it's been around forever, and has not been shy about being more left-leaning with its opinion pieces. But this is a reporter for NPR writing this story. Again, the headline is, I've been at NPR for 25 years. Here's how we lost America's trust. Mary Ann says, I don't watch the tele-live vision. That's a good way of putting it there, Mary Ann. But I want you to read this, because I think even those who are part of the media class that are willing to crash and burn America, some of them are saying enough is enough, and this is one of them. But this guy is a brilliant writer. He's willing to be honest. He's willing to put his neck out there and take a risk, and I think it's worth you hearing about it. So I'm going to read it to you, if you don't mind. You know the stereotype of the NPR listener? An electric vehicle driving, Wordle playing, tote bag carrying coastal elite. It doesn't precisely describe me, he says, but it's not far off. I'm Sarah Lawrence, educated, was raised by a lesbian peace activist mother. I drive a Subaru, and Spotify says my listening habits are most similar to people in Berkeley, California. I fit the NPR mold. I'll cop to that. So when I got a job here 25 years ago, I never looked back. As a senior editor on the business desk where news is always breaking, we've covered upheavals in the workplace, supermarket prices, social media, and artificial intelligence. It's true, NPR has always had a liberal bent, but during most of my tenure here, an open-minded, curious culture prevailed. We were nerdy, but not knee-jerk activists or scolding. In recent years, however, that has changed. Today, those who listen to NPR or read its coverage online find something different, the distilled worldview of a very small segment of the U.S. population. If you're a conservative, you will read this and say, duh, it's always been this way, but it hasn't. For decades, since its founding in 1970, a wide swath of America tuned into NPR for reliable journalism and gorgeous audio pieces with birds singing in the Amazon. Millions came to us for conversations that exposed us to voices around the country and the world radically different from our own, engaging precisely because they were unguarded and unpredictable. No image generated more pride within NPR than the farmer listening to Morning Edition from his or her tractor at sunrise. Back in 2011, although NPR's audience tilted a bit to the left, it still bore a resemblance to America at large. 26% of listeners described themselves as conservative, 23% as middle of the road, and 37% as liberal. Again, that's 26% of their listeners described themselves as conservative, 23% as independent or middle of the road, and 37% as liberal in 2011. By 2023, the picture was completely different. Only 11% described themselves as very or somewhat conservative, 21% as middle of the road, and 67% of our listeners said they were very or somewhat liberal. We weren't just losing conservatives. We were also losing moderates and traditional liberals. An open-minded spirit no longer existed within NPR, and now, predictably, we don't have an audience that reflects America. That would be a problem for any openly polemical, I can't say that word, news outlet serving a niche audience. But for NPR, which purports to consider all things, it's devastating both for its journalism and its business model. Like many unfortunate things, the rise of advocacy took off with Donald Trump. As in many newsrooms, his election in 2016 was greeted at NPR with a mixture of disbelief and anger and despair. Just to note, I eagerly voted against Trump twice, but felt we were obliged to cover him fairly. But what began as tough, straightforward coverage of a belligerent, truth-impaired president, according to this reporter, veered toward efforts to damage Trump or topple Trump's presidency. Persistent rumors that the Trump campaign colluded with Russia over the election became the catnip that drove reporting it. At NPR, we hitched our wagon to Trump's most visible antagonist, and this name will ring whatever it rings. Doesn't ring pleasant to me, but you'll know the name, Representative Adam Schiff. Schiff, who was the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, became NPR's guiding hand, its ever-present muse. By my count, NPR hosts interviewed Schiff 25 times about Trump and Russia. During many of those conversations, Schiff alluded to purported evidence of collusion. The Schiff talking points became the drumbeat of NPR news reports. But when the Mueller report found no credible evidence of collusion, NPR's coverage was notably sparse. Russiagate quietly faded from our program. It is one thing to swing and miss on a major story. Unfortunately, it happens. You follow the wrong leads, you get misled by sources you trusted, you're emotionally invested in a narrative, and bits of circumstantial evidence never add up. It's bad to blow a big story. What's worse is to pretend it never happened, to move on with no mea culpas, no self-reflection, especially when you expect high standards of transparency from public figures and institutions but don't practice those standards yourself. That's what shatters trust and engenders cynicism about the media. Russiagate was not NPR's only miscue, though. In October 2020, The New York Post published the explosive report about the laptop Hunter Biden abandoned at a Delaware computer shop containing emails about his sordid business dealings. With the election only weeks away, NPR turned a blind eye. Here's how NPR's managing editor for news at the time explained the thinking. Quote, "We don't want to waste our time on stories that are not really stories, and we don't want to waste the listeners' and readers' time on stories that are just pure distractions." End quote. But it wasn't a pure distraction or a product of Russia disinformation, as dozens of former and current intelligence officials suggested. The laptop did belong to Hunter Biden. Its contents revealed his connection to the corrupt world of multi-million-dollar influence peddling and its possible implications for his father. Again, this is a long-time seasoned professional reporter at NPR saying these things. The laptop was newsworthy, but the timeless journalistic instinct of following a hot story lead was being squelched. During a meeting with colleagues, I listened as one of NPR's best and most fair-minded journalists said, and listen to this, "It was good we weren't following the laptop story because it could help Trump." When the essential facts of the Post's reporting were confirmed and the emails verified independently about a year and a half later, we could have fessed up to our misjudgment, but like Russia collusion, we didn't make the hard choice of transparency. Politics also intruded into NPR's COVID coverage, most notably in reporting on the origin of the pandemic. One of the most dismal aspects of COVID journalism is how quickly it defaulted to ideological storylines. For example, there was Team Natural Origin, supporting the hypothesis that the virus came from a wild animal market in Wuhan, China. On the other side, Team Lab Leak, leaning into the idea that the virus escaped from a Wuhan lab. The lab leak theory came in for rough treatment almost immediately, dismissed as racist or a right-wing conspiracy theory. Anthony Fauci and former NIH head Francis Collins, representing the public health establishment, were its most notable critics. And that was enough for NPR. We became fervent members of Team Natural Origin, even declaring that the lab leak had been debunked by scientists. But that wasn't the case. When word first broke of a mysterious virus in Wuhan, a number of leading virologists immediately suspected it could have leaked from a lab there conducting experiments on bat coronaviruses. This was in January 2020, just 2 months prior to the epidemic or the shutting down of the country, of the world. During calmer moments before a global pandemic had been declared and before fear and politics spread and intruded. Reporting on a possible lab leak soon became radioactive. Fauci and Collins apparently encouraged the March publication of an influential scientific paper known as the Proximal Origin of SARS-CoV-2. Its authors wrote they didn't believe any type of laboratory-based scenario was plausible. But the lab leak hypothesis wouldn't die. And understandably so. In private, even some of the scientists who penned the article dismissing it sounded a different tune. One of the authors, Andrew Rambout, an evolutionary biologist from Edinburgh University, wrote to his colleagues, quote, "I literally swivel day by day thinking it is a lab escape or natural," end quote. Over the course of the pandemic, a number of investigative journalists made compelling, if not conclusive, cases for the lab leak. But at NPR, we weren't about to swivel or even tiptoe away from the insistence with which we backed the natural origin story, that is, that it just escaped from an animal in the lab. We didn't budge when the Energy Department, the federal agency with the most expertise about laboratories and biological research, concluded, albeit with low confidence, that a lab leak was the most likely explanation for the emergence of the virus. Instead, we introduced our coverage of that development on February 28, 2023, by asserting confidently that the scientific evidence overwhelmingly points to a natural origin for the virus. When a colleague on our science desk was asked why they were so dismissive of the lab leak theory, the response was odd. The colleague compared it to the Bush administration's unfounded argument that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction, apparently meaning we won't get fooled again. But these two events were not even remotely related. Again, politics were blotting out the curiosity and independence that ought to have been driving our work. I'm offering 3 examples of widely followed stories where I believe we faltered. Our coverage is out there in the public domain. Anyone can read or listen for themselves and make their own judgment. But to truly understand how independent journalism suffered at NPR, you need to step inside the organization. You need to start with former CEO John Lansing. Lansing came to NPR in 2019 from the federally funded agency that oversees Voice of America. Like others who have served at the top at NPR, he was hired primarily to raise money and to ensure good working relations with hundreds of member stations that require NPR's programming. After working mostly behind the scenes, Lansing became a more visible and forceful figure after the killing of George Floyd in May 2020. It was an anguished time in the newsroom, personally and professionally so, for NPR staffers. Floyd's murder, captured on video, changed both the conversation and the daily operations at NPR. Given the circumstances of Floyd's death, it would have been an ideal moment to tackle a difficult question. That is America, as progressive activists claim, beset by systemic racism in the 2020s, in law enforcement, education, housing, and elsewhere? We happen to have a very powerful tool for answering such questions: journalism. Journalism that lets evidence lead the way. But the message from the top at NPR was very different. America's infestation with systemic racism was declared loud and clear. It was a given. Our mission was to change it. When it comes to identifying and ending systemic racism, Lansing wrote in a company-wide memo, we can be agents of change. Listening and deep reflection are necessary, but not enough. They must be followed by constructive and meaningful steps forward. I will hold myself accountable for this. And we were told that NPR itself was part of the problem. Listen to this. In confessional language, he said the leaders of public media, starting with me, must be aware of how we ourselves have benefited from white privilege in our careers. We must understand the unconscious bias we're bringing to our work and interactions, and we must commit ourselves, body and soul, to profound changes in ourselves and our institutions, end quote. He declared that diversity in our staff and in our audience was the overriding mission, the, quote, North Star of the organizations. Phrases like, quote, that's part of the North Star, end quote, became part of meetings and more casual conversation. Race and identity became paramount in nearly every aspect of the workplace. Journalists were required to ask everyone we interviewed their race, gender, and ethnicity, among other questions, and had to enter it into a central tracking system. That would be equivalent to us interviewing people for our stories and asking them all those questions so as to help our story. That's something that would never happen at the Waxahachie Sun or any authentic media outlet. We were given unconscious bias training sessions. A growing DEI staff ordered regular meetings imploring us to start talking about race. Monthly dialogues were offered for women of color and men of color. Non-binary people of color were included too. These initiatives, bolstered by $1 million grant from the NPR Foundation, came from management, from the top down. Crucially, they were in sync culturally with what was happening at the grassroots among producers, reporters, and other staffers. Most visible was a burgeoning number of employee groups based on identity. They included marginalized genders and intersex people of color mentorship program, and I list a whole bunch more. All this reflected a broader movement in the culture of people clustering together based on ideology or characteristic of birth. If, as NPR's internal website suggested, the groups were simply a way to meet like-minded colleagues and help new employees feel included, it would have been one thing. But the role and standing of affinity groups, including those outside NPR, were more than that. They became a priority for NPR's union, an item in collective bargaining. The current contract in the section on DEI requires NPR management to keep up to date with current language and style guidance from journalism affinity groups, and to inform employees if language differs from the dictates of those groups. In such a case, the dispute could go before a DEI accountability committee. In essence, this means the NPR union, of which I'm a dues-paying member, has ensured that advocacy groups are given a seat at the table in determining the terms and vocabulary of our news coverage. Conflicts between workers and bosses, between labor and management, are common in workplaces. NPR has had its share, but what's notable is the extent to which people at every level of NPR have comfortably coalesced around the progressive worldview. And this, I believe, is the most damaging development in NPR, the absence of viewpoint diversity. There's an unspoken consensus about the stories we should pursue and how they should be framed. It's frictionless, one story after another, about instances of supposed racism, transphobia, signs of the climate apocalypse, Israel doing something bad, and the dire threat of Republican policies. It's almost like an assembly line. The mindset prevails in choices about language. In a document called NPR Transgender Coverage Guidelines, disseminated by news management, we were asked to avoid the term biological sex. The editorial guidance was prepared with the help of a former. Well, you don't need to know that. That's in parentheses. Side note: the mindset animates bizarre stories on how the Beatles and bird names are racially problematic, and others that are alarmingly divisive, justifying looting with claims that fears about crime are racist, and suggesting that Asian Americans who oppose affirmative action have been manipulated by white conservatives. For nearly all my career, working at NPR has been a great source of great pride. It's a privilege to work in the newsroom at a crown jewel of American journalism. My colleagues are congenial and hardworking. I can't count the number of times I would meet someone, describe what I do, and they'd say, "I love NPR." And they wouldn't stop there. They would mention their favorite host, or one of those driveway moments where a story was so good you'd stay in your car until you finished it. It still happens, but often now the trajectory of the conversation is different. After the initial "I love NPR," there's a pause and a person will acknowledge, "I don't listen as much as I used to." Or with some chagrin, "What's happening there? Why is NPR telling me what to think?" In recent years, I've struggled to answer that question. Concerned by the lack of viewpoint diversity, I looked at voter registration for our newsroom. In D.C., where NPR is headquartered and many of us live, I found 87 registered Democrats working in editorial positions. And you want to know how many Republicans? 0. So on May 3rd, 2021, I presented the findings at an all-hands editorial staff meeting. When I suggested we had a diversity problem with a score of 87 Democrats and 0 Republicans, the response wasn't hostile. It was worse. It was met with profound indifference. I got a few messages from some surprised, curious colleagues, but the messages were of the, "Oh, wow, that's a weird variety." Oh, wow, that's weird variety. As if the lopsided tally was a random anomaly rather than a critical failure by Diversity North Star. In a follow-up email exchange, a top NPR news executive told me that she had been skewered for bringing up diversity of thought when she arrived at NPR. So she said, quote, "I want to be careful how we discuss this publicly," end quote. For years, I have been persistent. When I believed our coverage has gone off the rails, I have written regular emails to top news leaders, sometimes even having one-on-one discussions with them. On March the 10th, 2022, I wrote to a top news executive about the numerous times we described a controversial education bill in Florida, you may remember this one, as the "Don't Say Gay" bill, when it didn't even use the word gay. I pushed to set the record straight and wrote another time to ask why we kept using that word that many Hispanics hate, Latinx. I think that's how they pronounce it. On March 31st, 2022, I was invited to a manager's meeting to present my observations. Throughout these exchanges, no one has ever trashed me. That's not the NPR way. People are polite, but nothing changes, so I become a visible wrong thinker at a place I love. It's uncomfortable, sometimes heartbreaking. Even so, out of frustration, on November the 6th, 2022, I wrote to the captain of ship North Star, CEO John Lansing, about the lack of viewpoint diversity and asked if we could have a conversation about it. I got no response, so I followed up 4 days later. He said he would appreciate my hearing my perspective and copied his assistant to set up a meeting. On December the 5th, the morning of the meeting, Lansing's assistant wrote back to cancel our conversation because he was under the weather. She said he was looking forward to chatting and a new meeting invitation would be sent, but it never came. I won't speculate why our meeting never happened. Being CEO of NPR is a demanding job with lots of constituents and headaches to deal with, but that's indisputable. But what's indisputable is that no one in a C-suite or upper management position has chosen to deal with a lack of viewpoint diversity at NPR. Despite our missteps at NPR, defunding isn't the answer. Many people want to defund NPR, as they do Planned Parenthood and a few others. But he says it's not the answer. As the country becomes more fractured, there's still a need for a public institution where stories are told and viewpoints exchanged in good faith. Defunding as a rebuke from Congress wouldn't change the journalism at NPR. That needs to come from within. A few weeks ago, NPR welcomed a new CEO, Catherine Maher, who's been a leader in tech. She doesn't have a news background, which could be an asset given where things stand. I'll be rooting for her. It's a tough job. Her first rule could be simple enough: don't tell people how to think. It could even be the new North Star. So I know that was long, and I may have lost some of you, but I guess what I'm saying here is what I've been saying all along, and that is that people, even on the left, are beginning to say we've gone too far. And NPR is an iconic company that's been around for a long time, is allowed that to run, and the reporter remains a part of their staff. So just be aware of that. Know what's going on in America. Know what's going on in your city. Waxahachie has been protected from stuff like this. I argue part of it's because of the sun and because of our doggedness and making sure that we alert you, expose things, that sort of thing. But we've really gone too far, and I just wanted to share with you how NPR worded it. Okay? So that's it for me today. I'm going to remind you, be a beast for good. I'll be back on Thursday. We'll have some more interesting things for you to be aware of and to respond to. Again, if you want to reach out to me, which some have, the email is scott@waxahachiesun.com, scott@waxahachiesun.com. Now, I'm very happy to have my seat taken by Mr. Jeffrey Lynch, rhyme-time poet, creator of this hat, and let him share a few things with you. So, Jeffrey, it's all yours.
Alrighty. As always, I'm happy to be here. As always, thanks, Scott, for having me here. Your comments on NPR are so spot on. I used to listen to them so much, and I didn't know all the things that you said had happened. I just felt they were happening. So that's been something quite unusual. I've got a new expression I'm using frequently, and I love using it, and it's called exceeds expectations, because it seems like for the last few years, it's a constant state of disappointment that we live in and that I live in, but little things just keep happening. And an example is these hats, and examples of the eclipse we'll talk about in a second. These hats, our man Doug, our marketing guy, he put these things together. I think they look beautiful. Scott was wearing it. They look. I don't really like silk screens. I like things that are embroidered, but the detail on this silk screen is so solid. It really looks good as far as I'm concerned. Let's go right to the eclipse and talking about exceeding expectations. The buildup of this eclipse was tremendous because we were on the totality line. The talk about people coming in from all over the country was big. Whether they ended up coming or not, I'm not certain how the numbers worked out. Thankfully, we didn't have any problems like we had anticipated. So it wouldn't be Jeff Lynch with Rhyme Time if I didn't have a couple poems, but I want to give you just a little bit of a background. So yesterday for the eclipse, my wife Rita and I were sitting out in a couple of lawn chairs in the front yard in a perfect position, and had a little TV table set up with a couple things on it. And when we put those glasses on and we looked up there, it too exceeded my expectation. But I want to give you a little prequel to that moment by saying I was having a conversation with a dear old friend of mine from Minnesota who he can be cantankerous as they come, but he's got a heart that's big as gold. So I called him up, and I had sent him a text of the poem I'm about to read. And he started ripping on me. He said, I don't want to hear about what's going to happen. I want to hear about what happened. I said, well, don't tell me when and why to write a poem. I wrote a poem, okay? So here it is. And here's how it goes. Eclipse. While the word eclipse rolls readily off the lips, be careful with your eyes. Experts say follow these simple tips. Don't look directly at the sun, or your vision could be done. Hate for you to go blind because you did not mind. Get the glasses. They are cheap and a memory to forever keep. Thankfully, there is no other rule for this event that is so way cool. At least we've been told so. We'll see how it does go. This occurrence is exceedingly rare. As for the no stare, best not to pretend to dare. Don't claim that you weren't aware. I hope it meets expectations, left speechless beyond expectations. I pray for nary a cloud, 'cause you will hear me out loud. A big hoot, a huge holler, maybe even my primal yelp. I won't need any help. Take my breath away. Tomorrow is eclipse day. So I wrote that the day before the eclipse, got out there, all set up, put those glasses on. I understood now it wasn't really just about protecting the eyes. You really couldn't see the eclipse happening without them. And as you know, we fought that weather all morning and fought those clouds. But when the predetermined time came, I believe it was 1:19, all of a sudden had the glasses on. And when you see that first small little corner, you say, this is what they're talking about. This is what it's all about. So I just started jotting down notes as the eclipse was happening. And here's the poem I wrote. It's called Totality. I awoke to a cloudy morn. Will an eclipse really be born? If it can't be seen, what is the big scene? But the sun has now found its way. Away from clouds, it tries to stay. Clouds and on and out sort of shroud. The temperature is starting to fall, losing heat from Earth's fiery ball. Down to nearly a half moon. Should be full here real soon. Now time for a bright orange crescent, such a heaven-sent present. 9 minutes to totality, racing the clouds for reality. If we don't get it all, this has been a ball. Our clouds still chase the moon. The winter will emerge real soon. The crescent is now just a sliver. This sight giving me a shiver. The birds have gone quiet and hid, scared away like a little kid. A glowing corona surrounds the sun. Venus and Jupiter will not be outdone. Planets are shining in midday. Yes, that is what I did say. The eclipse's peak is now come and done. As sung the Beatles, here comes the sun.
Very good.
Thank you. Thank you.
One of those in the sun tomorrow.
Is
One of them. I think it's the first.
is the first one? Okay, good, good. I look forward to that. So, one thing I do want to talk about is it's been great being on this show. Hopefully, it's a springboard to other things. But I do start my own show next Wednesday, the 18th. We pushed it back. I can't tell you how many times for how many different reasons, but it's for real now. And it's going to be available on Facebook. It's going to be available on Instagram. It's going to be available on YouTube. All the same ways that you watch it right now. You'll see it. You'll be able to see it with us. Our mission statement is rhyme time, a guaranteed good time. A typical show will be to have some guest readers, to have me reading some of my own stuff, have me reading some other stuff. But most importantly, the whole reason we ever decided to do this, the whole reason that I was inspired by Scott's inspiration was the ability to create live poems together. And I questioned whether it could really happen. But when I sat down with Jackson and Doug a few weeks ago and did a practice session, which you'll never see, we did create a poem called Laughing, and it came out really nice. And I used the simple concept that I use when I'm teaching at the elementary school level right now. I use what I call a poem starter, and I just gave them a start to a poem. I was busy laughing at you, laughing at me. Now I'm not going to read the whole thing to you right now, but that's how we're going to create poetry. The fact that we were able to sit in less than 15 minutes, the three of us, and create a poem. I can write a poem in 15 minutes, but to be able to write it with other people and get their input and get their fresh perspective was something I found extremely exciting. And then I mentioned this on a few other podcasts with Scott. Since I started being able to teach poetry at the grade school level at St. Joseph Catholic Church, it has been a thrill, going back to what I just said before, exceeding my expectations. We use the same thing with poet starters, but we do a rhyme up exercises with suffixes, and we do a rhyme up exercises with reading poems and having the ear try to capture what is the rhyme coming at the end of this on the air. The other thing that I'd like to do is to be able to create custom poems for you. And you say, what are custom poems? You know, if you look through my book, you'll see many, many different poems were basically written on request. And here's how it will work with custom poems. You're going to give me about 6 to 8 facts about a person. And we like to specialize in doing all the key holidays, starting with Mother's Day coming up would be our next one, Memorial Day right after that, all the key holidays, but in addition to that, all the special times for all the special people in your life. Is it a birthday? Is it a wedding? Is it an anniversary? Is it, I mean, it could be a funeral. It could be anything. And I think I've got the ability to create that for you. And what you will get, I'm going to have a standard package and a deluxe package, and we're not going to bog down with it. But my Waxahachie poem has been hugely successful here in town. I just got another check in the mail from one of our retailers here selling this in town over at Dove's Nest. And you'll get 2 8x10 with cardboard backing in a sleeve, 2 5x7, all of which are suitable for framing. And you'll get my latest book, Latest Hindsights, which is a compilation of my 3 books, 2020 Hindsights, Further Hindsights, and Latest Hindsights. So how are we doing on time, Jackson? We're just about at our limit. Those were the key things that I really did want to cover here today. One other thing that we'll do on the custom poems, well, I'll cover that another day, but we're going to have an ability to present that poem live to people at their home, place of work, any public place. And I think that'll be something that the recipient will really enjoy. So with that, Jackson's going to sign us off. Have a great night. Masters is coming this Thursday. A place like none other. Augusta, Georgia.